All righty, and welcome, Hoosier fans, to this special edition of the Assembly Call, this Indiana-Iowa pregame show. We are about 18 minutes from tip. It might be a little bit longer than that. These second slot games on the weekdays, sometimes our games get pushed back a little bit if the first game goes long. But all I know is, Hoosier fans, if you're anything like me, you have just been dying for this game to get here ever since that awful loss to Penn State. Well, it is almost here. And let me start out this pregame show by saying this. This is a huge game, like Notre Dame, like Michigan, but even bigger, because a top 5 team is coming into Assembly Hall. We need a big signature win. We've got to wipe the nasty taste of that Penn State game out of our mouths, and we need some positive momentum for the end of this season. So whatever your lucky IU gear is, whether it's lucky IU shoes, whether it's your lucky IU shirt, whether it's that you drink out of a lucky IU glass or your candy striped pants, whatever it is, get it on. I've got mine on. We got to pull out all the stops tonight because we need to get this victory. All right. Now, speaking of needing to get this victory, what are the keys to getting this victory? Because as confident as we are in our Hoosiers at home, and let's not forget the men's team and the women's team are a combined 27-0 at home this year. So there is some magic in Assembly Hall. We've known that, but there seems to be some special magic this year. But we can't just count on Assembly Hall magic to beat a good team like Iowa. The Hoosiers are going to have to play a good game. What are the keys? Well, let's start with what the coach thinks the keys are. And Tom Crean just got done talking to Don Fisher. And when Fish asked him what his keys were, he started with defensive transition. And I certainly agree with this. I mean, this Iowa team, one of the similarities between Iowa and Indiana is the pace they play with. So we know that Indiana likes to play fast. The Hoosiers' average possession length right now, 16.2 seconds, which is 66th in the country. Iowa's average possession length, 16.2 seconds, which is 63rd in the country. So they're slightly faster than Indiana by percentage points. But these are two teams that want to play fast. And so Indiana is going to have to get back in transition, not allow Iowa to get easy buckets, especially in Assembly Hall. I mean, we've seen teams that come in, and it just feels like the walls are caving in on them. The Hoosiers play good defense, and that basket starts to look really small. Well, if you let Iowa run and get easy buckets, the basket looks pretty big for anybody when you're a foot away from it. And so especially guys like Peter Jock, who are really adept at getting out and running, the Hoosiers have to do a good job of getting back and then making Iowa play in the half court. Now, the other big thing is rebounding. And this is where I think Tom Crean might have actually overstated Iowa's ability, because he talked about how good a rebounding team this is. Well, if you look at Iowa for the season, they are 136 in the country in offensive rebounding percentage at 31%. They are 229th in the country in defensive rebounding percentage at 31%. If you go to conference-only games, Iowa is actually 6th in the Big Ten at 30.2% in offensive rebounding percentage, and they are 13th in the conference at protecting their own glass. They're giving up 31% of opponents' misses as rebounds. And so that's a big opportunity for Indiana, because one of the consistent strengths of this Indiana team is offensive rebounding, where the Hoosiers for the season are getting 38% of their own misses, which is 11th in the country. In Big Ten play, it's dipped a little bit to 34.6%, but that's still third. And Indiana's doing a great job on the defensive glass in Big Ten play, only allowing opponents to get 22.3% of their misses, which is second. So I do agree that rebounding is a big key, but I look at it as an advantage for Indiana. And that's something where if we come here on the halftime show and Iowa's beating Indiana on the glass, that's not going to be good. This is a strength for Indiana, and they've got to make it a strength tonight, because that's a place where if they do turn it over a little bit more than Iowa, which the numbers suggest that they will, even at home, that's where Indiana can get possessions back, is on the glass. So watch the rebounding. It's especially important tonight. And then the other key for Tom Crean was moving without the basketball. And he talked about combating their length. Well, here are some interesting numbers for you. So Iowa's only lost one Big Ten game, which we know. That was the game against Maryland, at Maryland. In that game, Maryland only allowed Iowa to block 2 of their shots. So Iowa blocked 6.1% of Maryland's shots, just those 2 shots in that game. For the season, Iowa is blocking 14.4% of their opponent's shots. And that is, I believe that's top 10. Let me get the number. It's 17th. So they're 17th in the country in that. Well, in 3 of their 4 losses, they were below their season average in block percentage. And look, when you look at that, and you know, that again, that's another way. It's almost a de facto turnover if you get a block, recover that ball. So that's a big area for Indiana where they've got to pay attention. Again, offensive block percentage has not been something Indiana's been very good at. This has always been a program under Tom Crean that has gotten a lot of shots blocked. This season is by far the best Indiana's ever been under Crean. Indiana only allowing opponents to block 8.5% of their shots, which is 133rd in the country. So the Hoosiers need to do a good job of playing through the paint, being aggressive, but not allowing Iowa to get cheap possessions with block shots. It's big. And when Iowa has lost this year, and it's only happened 4 times, they have not been at the top of their game in terms of block percentage. So that's a big key. Another big key is that in 3 of Iowa's 4 losses, Peter Jok has been held below his season average of 15 points. And a couple of times it was well below. He is such an important player for this team. I mean, he is potentially a second all Big Ten player. We know how good Utah is, and he's a guy who's consistently gotten his this year. But if Indiana can find a way to harass Peter Jok into a rough shooting game, a tough night in Assembly Hall, that could go a long way toward Indiana getting this victory. One more note also about the block shots. The other thing to remember about Iowa is they block shots without fouling. So one of the other big strengths of Iowa is they are 6th in the country in defensive free throw rate, which means that other teams just aren't getting to the line a lot against the Hawkeyes. So when you're blocking shots and you're not allowing other teams to get to the line, that means that you're erasing a lot of otherwise maybe easy opportunities down low. And so Indiana's going to have to find a way to get those opportunities, but be smart about them, because a big key for Indiana all year has been their 2-point field goal percentage. They're 2nd in the Big Ten at 54.3%. And if you look at it on the season, they're actually better than that, 57%. And that's where Thomas Bryant's going to be really big. Indiana needs to get him the ball, which they didn't do against Penn State. And Tom Crean mentioned that. Not only did we miss shots against Penn State, but we also missed plenty of opportunities to get it into Thomas Bryant. And I know you've got Adam Woodbury down there, and Iowa's got a lot of length, but Thomas Bryant has proven that he can be trusted. When the guy gets position, get it to him. He's making 70-some% of his 2-point field goals, and in a game where Indiana's going to need to get easy baskets against a team that doesn't give up a lot of easy baskets, because Iowa they're decent in 2-point percentage defense, holding opponents to 47.3%. Thomas Bryant is your best chance to get those easy buckets. And then, of course, you want to work inside so that you can get it outside for 3. But that will be a challenge as well, because Iowa is 8th in the country at defending the 3, holding opponents to 29.4%. Now, we've gone this whole time. We haven't talked about turnovers yet. I'm sure you know how big of an issue this is, but it bears mentioning, because of all the differences between these two teams, this is the biggest. I mean, you look at Iowa, their offensive efficiency is 8th in the country. Indiana's offensive efficiency is 23rd in the country. But Indiana has a higher effective field goal percentage. They get way more offensive rebounds. They're better from 3. They're better from 2. There are so many reasons why Indiana is better on offense than Iowa. So why is Iowa's efficiency better? Iowa doesn't give away possessions. Indiana is 302nd in the country, turning it over on 20.6% of their possessions. Iowa is 4th in the country, turning it over on 14.2% of their possessions. A couple things going in Indiana's favor here, I think, which is that Indiana's been better at home at not turning the ball over. So hopefully that will continue tonight. And Indiana's pretty good at forcing turnovers on defense at 19.4%. So if Indiana can maybe push Iowa up to turning it over on 15.5%, 16% of their possessions, and Indiana themselves can get down into that 16 to 17% range, well, now you have a differential that Indiana can make up with offensive rebounding and possibly even with some 3-point shooting, assuming that the Assembly Hall magic is helping some of those threes go in, as it so often does. So that's so important, but Indiana can't let that be a 5-6 turnover difference tonight, because Iowa is too good. They're not going to lose games when they dominate you like that in turnovers, even against a team as talented as Indiana. So the Hoosiers have got to do a good job. Now, individual guys who have to play big. We already talked about Thomas Bryant And I think Yogi Ferrell is a given. Not that he will play well, although I think we can trust that. He didn't play great against Penn State, and he's got to bounce back and make some of those shots he was missing. But in a big moment, I trust him to have a big game. I'm going to say something now, and you're going to think I'm crazy, and you're going to disagree with me, but I'm expecting a big game from Troy Williams tonight. Heather, sitting over here, is laughing. But listen to this. Last year in Indiana's one game against Iowa, Troy had 13 rebounds. 5 of them were offensive. And Tom Crean has talked, especially recently, about how much better Indiana is when Troy is rebounding the ball. And we just talked about how big rebounding can be. 5 of those rebounds were offensive. That can help make up for the turnovers. And you know how many turnovers Troy had against Iowa last year? 0, to go along with 4 assists. If we get that kind of production out of Troy tonight, that will go a long way towards Indiana winning. Now, of course, he can't give it up on the other end. He's going to have to defend, and hopefully he'll shoot better than he did against Iowa last year because he was only 3 for 13. So that wasn't as ideal. But if you look at Troy getting 13 rebounds, 4 assists, and 0 turnovers, you know he was engaged. I don't remember that game off the top of my head, but as long as he wasn't taking crazy shots, and if he will work the baseline and be smart, he can really be a big, important player tonight. But he's going to have to play within himself. So I think Troy's a key. The other guy that I'm really watching is a key, in addition to OG Anunoby, who I think has to play big off the bench. And let me mention that real quick, the bench, because that is something else Tom Crean mentioned, is that they're really getting a lot of production off of their bench. And they have bench contributions you can count on. And for a lot of Big Ten play, Indiana has too, but we didn't against Penn State. The bench, I mean, Zeislov played well, but as Crean said, our freshmen played like freshmen. And OG and Jawan, they didn't have the type of impact that we've seen them have recently. Those guys need to play big, especially defensively. But the other guy that I think needs to play big and that I think will is Robert Johnson. I had a premonition earlier this week that this game would come down to a final shot and that Robert Johnson would get it and that he would make it. I'm not changing my prediction on that. You know, Robert did have 3 turnovers against Iowa last year, didn't have a good shooting night, but he got off 6 threes, which means that he was open. Now, whether he'll get those same looks tonight, that remains to be seen. But if he does, he needs to knock him down. And he's been shooting with more confidence lately, and we need him. We saw in the Michigan game that Indiana is at its best when Robert Johnson is really playing well and playing confidently. And so I think we've seen the starters struggle. I think we need to see Indiana get off to a fast start tonight, immediately wipe away any thoughts of a Penn State hangover, get ahead, get the crowd into it. You know, yes, Iowa has all juniors and seniors, and it's going to be hard to rattle them, but Assembly Hall can rattle even the most grizzled collegiate veteran. That's what we need. But for the crowd to really get in and work up into that fevered pitch, Indiana needs to get off early, get that momentum going, and they can do that by not allowing Iowa to get out in transition, moving the ball and making some threes or getting it inside to Thomas Bryant and protecting the glass. And if the Hoosiers do those things, and if they get off to a good start, and if we get good Troy and good Robert Johnson tonight, this is a game that Indiana will win. And we know that ranked teams have had a lot of trouble coming into Assembly Hall. It has been one of the hallmarks of Tom Crean's era at Indiana, that when ranked teams come in here, they leave with a loss. And it needs to happen again tonight so that the Hoosiers are 10-2, and so that the only debate that matters on this evening, when there apparently is a Democratic presidential debate going on, the only debate that's going to matter is at the end of this game, who is the best team in the Big Ten, and a win over Iowa will put Indiana right smack dab in the middle of that conversation. I'm feeling good about it. I hope you are too. Tweet me your prediction at Assembly Call. Let me know who you think is going to win. I've already said I think it's coming down to the last possession. I'm trusting Robert Johnson to take the shot, and I'm trusting Robert Johnson to make the shot. And hopefully when we come here on the post-game show, it'll be a celebratory one, and we'll be celebrating Indiana's biggest, most signature win of the season. It's now 3 minutes until 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern. Make sure that you have all your Indiana gear on. Get your drink ready. Get by the TV. It's time for some IU basketball. I will talk to you all on the halftime show. See you soon.